there is a specific kind of frustration that comes from procrastinating on something you deeply care about. It's not laziness, it's not indifference. In fact, that's what makes it so painful. You care about the project, you care about the relationship, you care about your health, your future, your dreams, and yet you delay. You scroll, you reorganize, you tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. And beneath all of it sits a quiet question. If this matters to me so much, why can't I just do it? Procrastination, especially when tied to something meaningful, is rarely about time management. It is almost always about emotional regulation. When a task matters, it carries emotional weight. The more you care, the more that task becomes connected to your identity. And when identity is involved, fear quietly enters the room. If you didn't care about the outcome, there would be no risk. But when something matters, it has the power to confirm or threaten how you see yourself. A creative project isn't just a project, it becomes proof of whether you are talented. A job application isn't just paperwork, it becomes evidence of whether you are capable. A difficult conversation isn't just communication, it becomes a test of whether you are worthy of being heard. Procrastination, in these moments, becomes protection. Psychologically, procrastination is often an avoidance response. Your brain is wired to move away from discomfort. When a task triggers anxiety, even subtle anxiety, your nervous system interprets it as a threat. Not a physical threat, but an emotional one. The possibility of failure, criticism, rejection, or imperfection activates the same stress pathways that once protected us from danger. And so, instead of moving toward the task, you move toward relief. Scrolling provides relief, cleaning provides relief, planning provides relief because it feels like engagement without exposure. These behaviors reduce anxiety in the short term, which reinforces them. Your brain learns, avoiding this makes me feel better. And that learning loop strengthens each time. This is why procrastination feels irrational. Logically, avoiding the task will create more stress later. But emotionally, in the present moment, avoidance feels safer. Your brain prioritizes immediate emotional relief over long-term benefit. There is also a deeper layer, perfectionism. Many people who procrastinate the most are not careless. They are highly self-aware and deeply self-critical. When you care, you want to do it well. And if well secretly means flawless, extraordinary, or beyond criticism, the standard becomes paralyzing. The task grows larger in your mind. Starting feels like stepping onto a stage without rehearsal. Perfectionism often forms early in life. Maybe you were praised primarily for achievement. Maybe mistakes were met with disappointment. Maybe love felt conditional on performance. Over time, you learned that doing things well kept you safe, emotionally safe. So now, when you face something important, the stakes feel immense. If it's not perfect, what does that say about you? Procrastination becomes a buffer between you and that question. If you don't fully try, your identity remains intact. I could have done better if I had started earlier. That sentence, though painful, protects you from something worse. I gave it my all, and it still wasn't enough. Avoidance keeps that possibility at a distance. There's also the role of overwhelm. When something matters, we tend to imagine the entire outcome at once. Instead of seeing the first small step, we see the finished result. The completed book, the transformed body, the perfect presentation. The gap between where we are and where we want to be feels enormous. That perceived gap creates cognitive overload. Your brain struggles to organize the path forward, and when clarity is missing, hesitation fills the space. Emotionally, this often feels like heaviness. You think about the task constantly, but the thinking drains you. The task lives in your mind as unfinished business, and because it matters, it occupies more mental real estate. You wake up with it, you go to sleep with it, the guilt builds, and paradoxically, guilt makes starting even harder. Guilt shifts the emotional tone from inspiration to self-criticism. Instead of "I'm excited to work on this," it becomes "I'm behind, I'm failing, I should have done this already." Shame creeps in, and shame is one of the strongest drivers of avoidance. When you feel ashamed, you withdraw, you disconnect, you distract. The task, once meaningful, now feels like proof of inadequacy. This cycle can quietly impact relationships as well. You may become irritable when reminded about something you haven't done. You may withdraw from conversations about your goals because they trigger discomfort. You might overpromise to compensate for internal doubt. Over time, the gap between who you want to be and what you're doing creates tension, not just within you, but between you and others. It also affects self-trust. Each time you delay something important, a small crack forms in your confidence. You begin to question your discipline, your motivation, even your character. Why am I like this? Becomes a recurring thought. And the more you label yourself as lazy or incapable, the more your nervous system anticipates failure the next time you try. The cycle reinforces itself. But here is something deeply important to understand. Procrastination is not a character flaw. It is an emotional coping strategy that once made sense. Your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort, from fear of failure, from fear of not being enough, from fear of losing control. It is not sabotaging you out of malice. It is trying to keep you safe. The shift begins when you stop fighting procrastination with harshness and start responding with curiosity. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What am I feeling about this?" That small change moves you from judgment to awareness. Maybe you are afraid the outcome won't match your expectations. Maybe you're grieving that you can't do it perfectly. Maybe you're exhausted and the task feels like another demand. Maybe you're scared that succeeding will raise the bar even higher. Success can be threatening too. It brings visibility, responsibility, and change. When you sit with these emotions instead of escaping them, something powerful happens. The task shrinks back to its actual size. It becomes an action again, not a verdict on your identity. Another key piece is redefining what starting means. When something matters, we often believe starting requires a surge of motivation. But motivation is unreliable because it follows action more often than it precedes it. The brain builds momentum through movement. Small, almost unimpressive steps signal safety. When you begin in a way that feels manageable, even slightly too easy, your nervous system doesn't panic. This is why breaking tasks into tiny actions is not a productivity trick. It is emotional regulation. Instead of write the report, it becomes open the document. Instead of fix my life, it becomes send one email. Each small completion rebuilds self-trust. Each step teaches your brain that engagement is not dangerous. It is also helpful to examine the story you attach to effort. Many people subconsciously believe that if something is hard, it means they are not good enough. So when discomfort arises, they interpret it as a sign to stop. But difficulty is not a verdict. It is simply part of growth. When you separate discomfort from identity, you loosen procrastination's grip. There is tenderness required here. If you have been hard on yourself for years, you cannot bully yourself into consistency. Self-compassion is not indulgence. It is stability. When you speak to yourself the way you would to someone you care about, acknowledging fear without shaming it, your nervous system relaxes. And a relaxed nervous system is far more capable of action than a threatened one. Over time, something shifts. The task that once felt overwhelming becomes familiar. The fear that once felt paralyzing becomes manageable. You begin to trust that you can start even when you don't feel ready. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that your worth is not measured by flawless execution. You procrastinate not because you don't care, but because you care deeply. The irony is that the very thing you avoid holds meaning, and meaning is always vulnerable. Healing does not come from eliminating fear. It comes from moving gently alongside it, from allowing imperfection, from taking small steps while your hands still shake a little, from understanding that avoidance was once protection, but you no longer need that protection in the same way. You are not broken. You are protecting something tender inside you. Your identity, your hope, your desire to matter. And when you recognize that, you can approach yourself with patience instead of punishment. Change becomes possible the moment you stop trying to force yourself and start trying to understand yourself. The next time you notice yourself delaying something important, pause. Ask what you're afraid of. Break the task down until it feels almost trivial. Begin before you feel ready. And when you stumble, respond with kindness instead of criticism. Because growth is not built on pressure alone, it is built on safety. And when you create emotional safety within yourself, even the things that matter most become something you can approach, not with fear, but with courage.